Welcome to a draft podcast, a podcast about the draft. My name is Noah. His name is Asu. I think you can tell we talk about the draft, specifically about the NBA. But Asu, do you want to just kind of give an idea of what you do?
Sure. I do, as far as draft stuff goes, I write for the Looney Bin at the moment, and I post clips, threads, that sort of thing on my Twitter whenever I watch games and find interesting tidbits, information. I sometimes occasionally post stats to, accompany the clips, but the main thing draft-wise that I do on Twitter is like threads breaking down certain games from prospects. Like I've done a couple of Jabari Walker games, done a Jabari Smith, Jaden Ivey, all that kind of stuff. And for NBA coverage, because I also write and cover the NBA, you can find me at Denver Stiffs and soon to be Hustle Points, probably. And yeah, that's kind of the general gist of things.
Yep. And I'm Noah. I also do draft stuff. I was way more active last year, but I still do it. I also do general NBA content independently. I make film breakdowns. And I'll link my Twitter, Asher's Twitter. I'll link my channel. I'll link the work that Asher does as well. I'll link everything that we do in the description below. You can subscribe to the channel, obviously. Helps us out a lot. And today we're going to be talking about Duke prospects. It's going to be a very Blue Devil heavy episode because Duke has a lot of prospects in this draft. They have, at least for me, 4 legit NBA prospects. They're the 4 that are likely going to declare this year. 2 of them are in my top 5. And Ashley, do you have any difference in the variance that you have with these guys ranked or not?
I have 5 guys going in the top 60 from Duke, as opposed to your 4. The 5th one that we're not going to cover today is Trevor Keels. I have him top 60 on my board, but
I forgot about Keels. That would make 5 for me as well.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, so
five top 60.
5
picks.
top 60. I do want to talk quickly about Keels. I think for Keels, he could benefit from going back, but it depends on how that class shapes up for next year. I'll talk about the class, next year's class at the end, for a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see if he goes. But he's one of the younger players in the class. He's built like a tank, and there's some shooting potential, but I think it's defensively. At least for me, I feel like the appeal to him is on the defensive side. But
yeah, he's going to be drafted as a defensive specialist sort of player.
I'm not going to say he's a Lou Dort, but I think he's kind of viewed that same way when Lou Dort was coming out. And Lou Dort went undrafted, but I do think Keels will get drafted. I don't think he makes it out of the top 40 personally, just based off because it's a big school. They've seen enough of them. People bet on young players all the time. So, and he has good enough stats, I think, to the point where he would get drafted and is soon enough. I think he's inconsistent, but there are enough good games on his tape to the point where you can teams will draft him.
Yeah, I do see some people still have him first round. I've occasionally seen him top 25, and I think that's going a bit far. I think the opening night game is still doing
I think 30s to 40s range is where I would have him right now. But I haven't updated my board yet, so I'll have to see where I have him after I update it. But he's an interesting prospect that I think could go late first round. If a certain team just feels like we can develop this guy, and I think going to a situation where he learns behind people would be best for his development. Some players, I feel like they go to situations where they should be playing right away and learning from the mistakes. These are players I feel would just benefit from learning behind guys. I would love to see him go to Milwaukee and learn under Drew Holiday. Like that would be a very ideal situation for him.
Yeah, I think going somewhere where he could learn from that sort of environment would be good for him.
Oh, like even Boston's a good spot. I wouldn't mind if like Boston picked him up. I don't know where. I don't think we even have a pick this year, but um, I think it's a good situation. Going like learning from Marcus Smart, obviously, who I didn't think he was actually going to win it until like it actually happened. But Defensive Player of the Year. But you know, obviously with Duke, you talk about the big two prospects are of
Yep.
course AJ and Paolo. I know people probably want to hear us talk about Paolo more, so we are going to start with Paolo. I have Paolo number one on my board. I've had him at number one since the start of the season, and this is the second straight year where I've had a guy at number one to start the year, and he ended the year number one with like no change. I personally think it's close between him and Chet, but I just think
Hmm.
that there's certain things that Paulo does that give him a slight edge.
Yeah, I think with me, I've flip flopped between Chet and Paolo as one throughout the season. It kind of varies day to day, honestly,
Mm-hmm.
but I have them at like 1A, 1B, depending on situation, the fit, that kind of thing. Because some teams really need a primary kind of guy who can build an offense
Mm-hmm.
around, who can really not just be like a not that Chet would be a role player on offense, but like they need someone who can get his. And Paolo does that better than Chet. And then some teams already have their shot maker, their shot creator. And while Paolo does other things besides scoring, which I'm sure we'll get into,
Mm-hmm.
Chet does a lot of complementary things as opposed to Paolo more so being on ball,
Mm-hmm.
controlling the pace of the
Yeah.
game, dictating what happens. Some teams need one more than the other, and that's where it comes down to 1A,
Mm-hmm.
1B. They're obviously tier 1 for me.
Yeah, they're
Like
two
those
one
two
for
have
me. They've
yeah,
it's
those
not.
two
I don't
have
think it's
made
as big
themselves.
of a gap as some people do, but I think there is like a noticeable. The gap I would compare it to from like them and like the rest of this class would be like the gap I probably had between Cade and Mobley last year, where I didn't think there was too much separation between the two, but and I still feel this way about this as well. As for long term, I think Mobley's been better than Cade as a rookie, but still long term, those two have separated themselves like by that same amount of margin that like I had between like Mobley and Cade. Uh, if I were to stretch it a little bit, it would be like the gap I had between like Mobley and Green, which wasn't as big as most people would think it is. But I just think that those two um, have the most potential to like those guys I could see making all NBA teams. And you know
Mhm.
it's possible the other guys do make all NBA teams as well, but and if any, those are the two that like I have the most confidence in. I'm like they could make all NBA teams in their career, especially with Paulo more than anything.
Mhm.
The reason I have Paulo at one is to me he has the most go to scoring ability in this draft.
Mhm.
And he's the only one I can look at confidently out of any of these guys in the draft and say, I'm decently confident that he could be a 25 plus point per game scorer in this league. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know if that would be on a great team. I don't know if that would be on a good team or a bad team, but he has that ability. You know, it's very evident. I think sometimes people have overthought him a little bit. I don't necessarily agree with the argument that he doesn't have a lot of upside because with his physical tools, with his basketball skills, the way he thinks the game, it's hard for me to believe he doesn't have a high ceiling.
Yeah, I think that people tend to focus on the scoring, and that's a huge part of this game. And that is probably the separator between him and Chet for me, because like separator in like skill set, because
Mm-hmm.
Chet is more so defensive
Yeah.
oriented, pick and pop kind of
Mm-hmm.
guy.
It,
Paolo is the go-to
yeah,
scorer
it's more
mold,
of like
and
they have the same amount of impact, I believe, but the way that impact adds up is different. Is I think the best way to put it. But we'll talk about Sat more in his own episode, obviously.
mhm.
But um, you
Yeah.
know, I just think that you don't find prospects like Paulo a lot. Like that's the thing for me.
Hmm.
Um, you know, you don't find guys that have this combination of physicality and basketball skills. I remember when I first was introduced to Paulo back around, I want to say it was 2018 or 19 that I was introduced to him. He was like a sophomore in high school. And you
Hmm.
know, like the term, like, I mean, like big guards, and talk about centers that supposedly have like these guard-like skills, but you realize they aren't very functional. And I thought it was just a case of that more than anything I was told about him. Because he was around like 6'8", 230 at the time, which is wild to think about for someone that's a sophomore in high school.
Hmm. Yeah.
And then I started watching him really focus in his junior year. Uh, and his junior year, I'm like, no, I realized like this is functional. Like this isn't just like, oh, we can do it in practice. He can do it in warm ups. Like he can do all this dribble stuff. But once the game starts, he's not really doing it. Like he's
Hmm.
able to do this stuff in a game. And it was just rare to see someone that young, that physically well built, doing stuff like that. Uh,
Yeah.
and the moment Cade Cunningham graduated from high school, I believed I had Paulo as like the best player in high school, regardless of class.
Hmm.
Uh, I still think of him that highly. I think people like I know people talk about like this is a weaker draft. I don't agree with that necessarily, but you know like I still view Paulo like very highly. I
Yeah.
haven't done like real prospect grades yet. I wait till the end of the cycle, but it's very much like I feel like kind of like I'm very confident he's going to be a 98 graded prospect, which is the
Hmm.
same grade I gave Evan Mobley, same grade I gave DeAndre Ayton, same grade I gave LaMelo Ball as a prospect. Like I think he's that level of prospect.
Yeah, I think that as in terms of functionality, he has a lot of tools that go outside of the scoring. What I
Mm-hmm.
was trying to get to earlier was like while his scoring is the main focus of him as a prospect, his passing is something that really pops out on film.
Mm-hmm.
Like whenever I watch him, you can see him make great like dump off passes to
Mm-hmm.
Mark Williams. He makes excellent reads a lot of the time. They're not the most advanced reads, but he
Yeah.
knows the right passes to make and when to make them. You can see him running probably pick and roll at the next level. I wouldn't be
Yeah.
shocked at.
Which
You
is
can see him
wild to think
running
about.
THOs.
Like
Yeah, like he
he
makes
like
great passes out of
that's
the post.
like
He
I think
has a
there's a lot of
lot.
skill with him as a passer. That's the thing.
Yeah,
I think
he's a legit playmaker.
yeah, like he could legitimately like make plays for others as a passer. Um, he said in interviews that like he loves passing. It's what he loves to do. It's a big part of his skill set. I do think he has some tunnel vision problems. I think there's like some vision problems. Uh, but they aren't like too noticeable. Like I don't think he'll ever be like like this generational passing player. But the best way I can describe his passing would be like Joel Embiid level passer. Where Joel Embiid's a very good passer for a big man. And he's someone that averages like 5 assists per game, like per 36. I think he can be that as a passer. Like, I don't think he's ever going to average like 8 assists, 10 assists a game. But like, I think he can be like someone that does what he needs to do as a passer. And I do think he's somebody that like I think, and I always say this about passing. The best skill you can have as a passer is understanding your scoring gravity, and he does that, and that's what's most important.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that he utilizes his gravity really well, like you said, and like on driving kicks, that's one
Mm-hmm.
of the That's where you see a lot of his assists come from.
Yeah.
Is he'll drive, defense helps, and he immediately kicked it out to like AJ Griffin
Mm-hmm.
was someone who benefited a lot from that.
Yeah.
You know, shooters, Wendell Moore, and he just is a functional playmaker.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he will be top of the league like you said, but it doesn't need to be top of the league to be
No, it doesn't.
impactful.
When he can
And
be
I
as good of a
think,
scorer as he is, no, it does not have to be. If it is,
yeah,
that's awesome, but he doesn't have to be that.
yeah,
You know, I really just think that a lot of what he does, though, like in zone, not just with the passing, not just with the shooting, it's like everything he does on offense is that
hmm
handle. The handle is what makes like everything work. I think every player has a foundation to their game where
hmm
there's one thing that makes like everything else around them work. I just did a video about Joel Embiid where I talked about the the size, strength, movement skills, footwork kind of combination that allows him
hmm
to be a great like his post game is the foundation of everything else that he does on offense. And for me, I think both the physical tools and the athleticism, movement skills that Paulo has, and the handle, that's the foundation for everything else that he does on offense. Um,
hmm
I don't know if you feel the same way. You can feel free to disagree, but like, that's just how I feel. Like that handle is like the foundation of what makes him such a great offensive player.
I like the handle. It's functional. I think it could do with a little tightening up,
Mm,
which could be
yeah.
sad for a lot of handles, but a lot of the time he can be a little like forceful with things
hmm
and like commit
I think,
charges because he's
yeah.
trying to just brute force his
hmm
way through things.
I think.
And
Okay, go
he
ahead.
sometimes just like, you know, finds himself forcing things sometimes. And I think he could be more decisive with it. I don't know if like tightening up is the right word. I
I
just
don't
think
think it's
reining it in a
tightening
little
up
bit.
because I think it's the thing with his handle, and I agree with what you're saying. Like he can be a bit out of control at times.
Hmm
Is it's not as much an east to west problem. Like his side to side dribble's fine. When the way
hmm
when he creates it, I think it's more of a north like a driving problem more than
Yeah.
a like a side to side problem. Like I think his sidestep is under control. I think when he hang dribbles to either side, he's fine.
hmm
Um, for me, I do think he can be a bit out of control, like attacking the basket.
hmm
Um, but I definitely see where you're coming with that. And I think that might just be a
hmm
product of like not fully having like understanding like how much momentum you have moving forward while
Yeah.
attacking the basket. This is really like the first time he's facing like real competition that can
hmm
somewhat match up with his physicality. Not much of it can match up with his physicality and the athleticism, but like this was like probably his first like real test when you think about it. Like I know he played
Yeah.
EYBL, I know he played guys like that, but college it's
There's
just
a
a different
difference.
level. Like especially in
Yeah.
the ACC. Um,
Yeah.
my biggest concern with his offense is he can be a bit indecisive at times.
hmm
I think he has a good triple threat. Sometimes I think he goes to triple threat a bit too much. Like you'll see it when he like takes threes sometimes, or he'll hesitate a little bit when he needs to go straight up. Um,
Yeah.
there were times I felt like he passed up open shots as well,
hmm
where like he's this poet,
Yeah.
and I think that's something that we'll need to work on. But that's something I've seen other players fix, so I'm not like too worried
Yeah.
about it. And which is true with his like overall like game. It's just like yeah, you know, he has flaws, but like they're fixable flaws. There aren't many like legit flaws that like you have like I feel like I have legit concerns about with him. Uh,
Yeah.
where it's just like, oh, this is a problem with him, and this is on both ends of the floor. Defensively, I have concerns. I would say I have more concerns, but I think that like he's not terrible on defense per se.
Yeah. He's not awful on
Well,
that end. On ball when he's engaged, he's good.
mm-hmm,
He moves his hips well. He has
yeah,
good footwork. In isolation, fun little stat. In isolation, when guarded by Paolo Banchero per synergy, opponents shot 22% on isolations. And when he was guarding pick and roll ball handlers, they
mm-hmm,
shot 13% on those field goals that were attempted.
yeah,
And be it those were on very limited samples. And those stats probably prop him up a little too much on
mm-hmm.
that end. but he is good at guarding in one-on-one spaced situations. But a lot of the defensive questions with him come off the ball because he has so many lapses where he just gets backdoored or misses a rotation or something happens and he just isn't where he needs to be. And that happens way too much for it to not be a red
concern.
flag.
I totally agree with that as well.
Yeah.
He had the problem in high school. He had a bit of an effort problem on defense in high school. I noticed the move with his actual high school tape, the effort problem, where like he would just like take coast on offense. Which, to be fair, just about every like 6'10" player in America is bored in high school. It's just how it is because there aren't many 6'10" like 15, 16-year-old kids that match up with them. But the effort, he did give more effort on EYBL on defense. So I do think like he does play up to competition. I would like to see him just be consistent on defense in general. But I don't think the defense is terrible. The best way I can describe it like right now, it's like Jaylen Brown, where there are legit flaws with Jalen's defense. He's not good off ball on defense. But like
good is doing him a little
no, I do
more
think
than I think that deserves.
I don't think he's good. I'm not gonna flat out slander my guy, but I have some biases here, but but I don't think it's to take away from this guy can give you 25. Like that's the thing. Like I think that like he does Jalen like Jalen Paul does enough on the ball to kind of make up for it a little bit. And I do think defense you get exposed a bit more on defense in college just because, and it's easier to notice off-ball deficiencies because they play so much zone in college. It's not straight up man-to-man, which can be painful to watch at times, I will admit. I'm not the biggest fan of watching college basketball because they run so much zone. But at the next level, he will need to work on it a bit. I do think you can make up for it by putting him on a big. Somewhat. But, it is something you have to work on. He does need to work on a bit.
Yeah, I also
think it's easier said than done as well. When people say, we can just improve off ball. It takes more than that. Like, I don't think he was like...
Yeah.
Like, it takes...
It might be a wiring thing with him.
Yeah, that's the thing. It takes a bit more than that. But
I don't project him to be
like I don't think he's like a
good
defender. I think he's passable defender. Not a liability on defense is the best way I would describe it.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be like Trae Young levels of defense, but I
don't think anyone will be that bad.
Well, yeah, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
like
I know
what
you mean, but like
horrendous defensively. I do think he will be passable and
I think that
functional. I don't think that there's roles that he can fill.
I think that like just being a good athlete will help him out. Like can make him like this. I don't think it's
his
like
frame does him a lot of favors.
Yeah, like
for sure.
He's just strong as hell and can move his feet, slide his hips, move side to side, stuff like that. What do you project him to be like at his best? Like, what do you think his potential will be? Because for me, I think like a 25, like 8-5 on like 48, 37, like 80 split kind of guy. Like that's what I think he could be at his best, which is all NBA level, like easily.
Yeah, I think at his best, he's probably a on-ball guy with like secondary playmaking chops. With like, I think you pair him with a guard who can like they can play off each other, and I think if you got him like an all-star level guard, I think that's a playoff team at his best. Like, I think the Julius Randle comps that he gets.
It depends on what Randle we're talking about, though. Like, that's the thing.
Well, I think
his peak.
Like,
I understand saying like, he can
Randle.
be like what Julius Randle was like in that like last season, where Julius Randle was legitimately playing like a top 30 player in the league. But I don't think it's a great comparison for him. I saw a Pistons Blake Griffin comp when Blake Griffin was like, because oddly enough, like I know like athletically he wasn't what he once was, but I do think that Pistons Blake Griffin, like when he was like on being level in Detroit, is the best version of Blake Griffin. Like,
Yeah, that skill set I feel is a good comp for Paolo. Like,
mm-hmm,
I think a little bit of that with like some more pop to his
mm-hmm,
athleticism. I do think some people have pitched him as like a five or like a small ball five,
like,
and that's not really going to happen. Because if you
also,
watch, a lot of the time, he weak side defensively, he isn't there. He doesn't have like as much athleticism as probably needed to do that super consistently. He has some blocks and that kind of thing,
mm-hmm,
but more often than not, it's not there enough to like
yeah,
have as high of a ceiling out of five. I think for him to reach his ceiling, you need to have him with like a good like role center where and like a good like Mark Williams kind of
yeah,
archetype because a lot of the assists he got were dump offs, were
mm-hmm,
wraparounds to Mark Williams, and those two had a great chemistry. And on defense, Mark Williams helped cover up a lot of Paolo's
mm-hmm,
backdoor cuts when he would have defensive lapses. Mark Williams helped him a lot with that. And I think if you pair him with someone like that at the next level, that will help him get, you know,
mm-hmm,
more hidden defensively. I don't
yeah.
think you need to hide him. I think it'll help him on the defensive end.
So it's funny because I'm like when you're saying this, I was thinking I'm like, man, I really wish like Isaiah Stewart wasn't like 6'8", because Detroit would have been a really fun fit for him. Because I think that it wouldn't be a seamless fit, but I do think him and Cade works. Um,
Yeah.
and then Isaiah Stewart has the skill set to be like what you look for in the center next to him. But like the problem is, it's like, do you really want like two small like guys in your front court? Well, Paulo's not small. Like Paulo's like legit like 6'10",
Yeah.
but still, it's like, do you want your 6'10" power forward with a 6'8" center? I think it can
Yeah.
work, but it's not seamless. But I like the Detroit fit.
Yeah.
It's weird. It's hard to find a great fit for him. Um,
Yeah. I
I
think
think it's a
that
situation where any team in the top two should just take him. Like
yeah,
that's the
for
thing.
sure.
But it's like like I can look at settings like Houston, great fit. I can
Hmm.
look at somebody, like Jabari and be like, okay, OKC, great fit. Like that's
Hmm.
a seam. Well, Jabari might be the most like seamless like fit player in this draft. Like he
Yeah,
basically
he's
fits with
probably the
every
most.
team. Like he can basically
Yeah,
play.
he's probably the most
Mm-hmm.
portable guy. Like you can just plug and play him.
Yeah,
He can scale his game up or down.
but
There, like Jabari is
mm-hmm.
a guy who you can do a lot of that stuff with. I like his fit in Orlando a lot.
Yeah.
I think I think him and Franz are like good enough
Mm-hmm.
uh, playmakers and that kind of thing to like
I would love to
be a
see that
good
front court work.
offensive front court. Yeah, and then
Um,
Wendell Carter like holding it down defensively. I think that like front court would be really fun.
mm-hmm.
The question is what they do with the back court because the spacing of a lineup of like Markel,
Mm-hmm.
insert shooting guard, like, and then front Paolo and Wendell.
Mm-hmm.
Wendell started shooting threes better, but he's still not like a super plus spacing wise.
Mm-hmm.
Paolo coming into the league will not be a plus spacing wise more than likely. I think at his peak he's like a league average shooter from three with like decent volume, but I don't see
Mm-hmm.
that right away. He will probably shoot around like
Yeah.
30% in his rookie season or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think like Orlando is a good fit because at a certain point they'll figure it out. Like
Yeah.
they have good people running that organization now. They have, you know,
Mm-hmm.
that's a fun fit offensively, and all three of them are plus passers for their
Yeah.
positions, so they can make that work for sure.
Yeah. I think that works. As far as like, I think he's like definitely the best fit.
Hmm.
Really, I think the best teams for Paulo are teams that can't be picky.
Yeah.
A team like Portland, like they can't be picky. He's got to take whoever's there, like no matter what. Like, and I think like there's enough there. Like, and the thing is, like, I think no matter what, a team in the top two should take him because and it's like, oh, but then you have to work to build around him. Like, but the thing is, he's a prospect worth building around, to me at least.
Yeah.
Where it's like you should be willing to make roster changes to make a better fit for him. It's like, oh, this is the guy you build around. I think out of any prospect in this draft, he has the most build around ability or build around potential. I still believe like he's the only prospect in this class that I believe could be a superstar. And I don't think he will be a superstar, but out of everyone here, it's like, okay, you had to pick one of them, and you had to pick. Which one do you think would be a superstar? I would pick Paolo. It's just that. So I like Portland because he's a local guy. He's from Seattle, but like PNW, so like there's that. But I like the Orlando fit a lot. I think that could be interesting to see. But you know, the only team I think I'd have to look it up and see. But I'm pretty sure like, there are only like a handful of teams that I'm looking at in like that area that like have their guy in the top of the draft. Yeah, where I feel kind of like they're the superstars. I think the only one is like Detroit for me.
I don't love the fit in Houston.
I don't know the fit. I would take Chet if I'm Houston and have number one pick.
Yeah, I think Chet is the better pick for Houston, but like.
But a lot of these teams don't have their guy. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like, Detroit's the only team, I think, in the top 5 that has their guy. And Cade. Because, like, I think it goes without saying that Cade would be the number one pick if it was in this draft. Because, like, I still believe Cade's a generational, like, prospect. But, you know, Indiana's a team that could be interesting for Paulo. I actually really, really would love to see that fit. I know like Miles Turner's kind of committed to staying in Indiana now, but even then, it's just like you have Miles at the 5, you have Paulo at the 4, and then you have Halliburton running it. I think that would be a fun fit among the top 5 teams.
Yeah, I think Miles Turner would be a good front court partner with him, but. Yeah, I mean, we'll have to see how the draft lottery plays out. And
for all we know, a team like New Orleans could get the first pick, or San Antonio could.
Yeah, I think him and Chet are the clear top 2 picks. They're going to be the number 1 and number 2 picks. And if you are picking with a top 2 pick, you see that guy as someone you are willing to make roster changes for.
Yeah.
So at the end of the day, it'll be, it'll be there.
I do want to talk now about the other big prospect on Duke. One of my favorite, I think pretty sure it's one of your favorites as well from this class.
Jeremy Roach.
No. He's going back to school, I think, isn't he?
Yeah.
I think he probably should. Could you imagine if we did that though? Yeah, it's AJ Griffin.
Let's do
a whole section. Jeremy
Roach. Yeah, no.
Maybe next year, we'll say. But,
oh, God.
AJ Griffin, he's my number 3, but I have 3 through 5, like, basically, like, tied. Or, like, those 3 guys are the next 2. Like, him, Jaden Ivey, and Jabari Smith are all 2-2 for me. I think he's the best shooter in this class, personally. I think you can make an argument for Jabari Smith as the best shooter. I just think there's a bit more variance with what AJ does.
Yeah. I know you and Zay have been super high on AJ, and I am relatively high on AJ. I have him, I believe, 5 or 6. But I think I have more questions than you do, because I think
it really is. It just depends on how much you bank on him returning to what he was able to do.
Yes.
I am willing to bank on him returning to what he was able to do because none of the injuries that he suffered are long-term injuries. That's the thing for me. If he had like a tear or like a serious like reoccurring thing going on with him, like I would be more concerned. But because it's like things that athletes come back from all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that I'm really happy. He's like that dude from SpongeBob. Remember when they're trying to sell chocolate?
Yeah.
He kind of reminds me of
Yeah.
that. I don't think he's as injury prone as this. You know, like he supposedly kind of fits the mold of like that guy. Like you'll always see this when a recruiting class gets like the three top players, where he's kind of the odd man out. His stats kind of reflect that, but he's like significantly better than every other odd man out I've ever seen. And the thing is, like, most times when you see an odd man out from a recruiting class, it's because of minutes that has happened because he's not as good as the other two guys. The only reason like AJ really doesn't have great stats is because the coaching staff, specifically Coach K, did not do a good job of handling how to use him.
Yeah, they utilized him mainly as an off-ball scorer, but also I think that that's probably where he's best utilized.
But the
I
thing is,
I
for
don't think they
me,
did a great job with him,
well, I just think
but
the shot
also
attempts were, for me, like, that was the thing. Like, he should have been
yeah,
taking
there's
more shots than he was.
yeah, with the whole athleticism thing,
I don't think he's a great
I
athlete, I'll
buy
be
into it
honest.
less than yeah, I don't buy into it
I don't think he's still going to
as
be a
much as
good
him like getting
athlete, but, like, I can see he's not the freak athlete he used to be. Like, this used to be someone that was above. This used to
and I
live above
don't
the rim.
yeah, and I don't you are higher on him getting back to where he was than I am because going through a lot of lower body injuries, they pile up even
Mm-hmm.
if none of them individually are long term. Those happened during some of the most important physical developmental years that he has and that athletes have when like his body was fully coming into itself. He suffered a lot of these injuries, and that's concerning to me because it probably means his body isn't like fully developed to where it should be. And you can kind of see like
I know so
I'm
with
a
his
Nuggets fan, so
ankles.
take for example like
Your ankles, it's the
Gary
ankle.
Harris.
Oh,
Yeah,
but
take for example like
is this going to
Gary
be a thing where we
Harris,
mention
where
Kerry Harris every podcast? Because I'm totally down for that. Like, just bringing him up every podcast.
but like if you look at him throughout his career in Denver, he was good and he never had a super serious injury, but he had a bunch of little injuries and they piled up.
Mm-hmm.
And he eventually became a shell of his former self.
Yeah.
He's found a little bit more of that back in Orlando, but he's still not the athlete he once was.
Mm-hmm.
And it like
You cut out there.
and I'm not saying that AJ has mental stuff. I'm just saying like, okay, like just a lot of the little knickknack kind of things,
Mm-hmm.
they pile up. And I think that happened with AJ and it happened at an even worse time than say a Gary Harris or,
Mm-hmm. I
a million other
yeah.
players.
I think he can
Because
make up for it though, despite being like physically built. Because I think like you know what I mean, but like I'm not saying he'll ever fully get back to what he once was with the injuries. I do agree, like yeah, they do pile up, but he can make up for that by being like just physically just as built as he is. Because I'll tell you what, there aren't many 18-year-olds that I've seen that are built like this.
yeah,
That's
and
that's a big selling point with them, I believe.
yeah, but like I don't feel like he
Utilizes
utilizes
it.
it that
I
well.
do wonder though if that's a mental thing, where he's not
Maybe
afraid. Because the thing for me is, I'm not saying like he's like fully like afraid, because there are times like he almost recklessly attacks the basket at times. Um, I wouldn't say attack the basket, but like, there's some like things that he does on both ends of the floor where I'm looking at him, I'm like, okay, you're being a bit reckless with this. For me personally, I do notice some hesitation when he attacks the basket. He does not attack the
yeah,
basket with as much power as somebody with his frame said, or usually does.
yeah.
And I do think he does.
He,
I don't think it's like, oh, because he can't. I think it has a lot to do with he's just very hesitant mentally just doing that. So I found that interesting with him. But again, the big thing is the shooting. Like, this is a special shooting prospect.
Yeah, a lot of the shooting that he does is really, really good. And a lot of people are like, oh, he shoots too wide.
But the thing for me is it goes in, it goes
But
in.
we've seen people with wide bases
Yeah.
play. Yeah, like if it goes in, it
His
works. Like
what I
Jaren
worry about
Jackson's jumper
works.
is not pretty, but like it works. So the thing I
Yes.
worry about with like his wide base and that kind of thing is he plays very wide.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Yeah, I see that.
it hinders him a lot. Like when he's driving, he stays wide,
Mm-hmm.
and he doesn't have like the best shin angles. Like when he's driving, it never looks good. Like there are occasional possessions where it will look good, but it always looks like he's working too hard for it. And then right as he gets like almost to the rim, if he gets to the rim, because a lot of the time he gets walled off and that sort of
Mm-hmm.
thing. But when he gets to the rim, a lot of the time he'll settle for a contested floater
Floater.
when he could just keep going all the way to the
Mm-hmm.
hoop. And like outside of his shooting off ball, I don't see a ton of like stuff there. And be it the shooting is good enough to justify like a top pick to me, but I am pretty low on his actual on ball chops because I haven't seen like good footwork when he's driving. I haven't seen
It's
him like
weird because
driving
I agree with
instinct.
what you're saying as far as like driving, but like his
Mm-hmm.
footwork driving is like not good. But I do think like weird his footwork when like creating off the dribble to create a shot, like specifically from three, is like good.
Yeah,
Um,
like his shot relocation and that sort of thing
yeah,
is
like his
stellar.
step
And
back is
like,
very like
yeah, I've
wow. Like
seen
when
like
you see
multiple
that, you're
like
like whoa. But
yeah, I've seen a lot of
mhm,
sidestep threes that he takes, and those shots are good, and the footwork to create those shots is good. But it's everything within the arc that worries me,
yeah,
and it's the same with Jabari Smith.
it's weird,
It's
but for
just
two
Jabari
different
Smith happens to
reasons.
be yeah. It also
It's
happens to be that
weirdly
Jabari
too.
Smith is 4 inches taller and a significantly better defensive
Yeah.
prospect to me. So I
Um,
think Jabari is the better prospect, but
I
also
probably have
like
AJ ahead of Jabari just because I just feel like, and I'm not gonna. It's not like I'm using the age excuses because Jabari
mhm,
and AJ, amazingly are both like very young for this class.
mhm.
Like they both, I maybe not Jabari as much, but definitely AJ could legitimately still be in high school right now, and it wouldn't be like, oh, he's too old thing.
Mhm.
Um, I'll give you some perspective on this. When AJ gets drafted into the NBA, he'll be a year younger than I think it was like three out of the four a year younger than three out of the four first round picks from last year from in the top five.
Mhm.
He'll be a year
Yeah.
younger than Cade was. He'll be a year younger than Scotty was. He'll be a year younger than Mobley and Suggs were.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty sure he's close to a year younger than Chet, which is wild to think about. Um,
Yeah, I don't buy
I think
into
it's one of
like
those things where I just buy into his priors a lot, where you're kind of
mhm.
banking on it. I know I buy into priors more than you do.
Yeah.
It's what makes it great though, because we have different perspectives on different things.
Mhm.
Um, but you know, for me, I don't think he's like out. I think like he's a top five lock at this point for me, at the very least.
Yeah, I
Um,
have him around 5, but also like the biggest hole for me with him, we haven't even touched on it, is his defense
oh no,
because
the defense is
defensively
not good. Like
he's a wreck. Like
it's a legit train wreck.
yeah,
From biting on
and
the
it's
biting on the pump fakes is the one that stands out to me the most when
mhm,
watching him.
yeah,
Where it's like he's a big dude, so like when he jumps, there's not a great chance for a second jump from him.
yeah,
Um, I think there are tools for him to be a good defender, despite being physical. Like that's the path he needs to take at this point to be a good defender. But he has not done that at all yet.
Yeah,
Um,
and also like hit.
like Paul,
It's not
I
even
think he
like the
struggles off ball.
athleticism.
I
Yeah,
think
it's
he
not even
struggles.
like the athleticism with him. Like he's not where he used to be. It's just his instincts are bad. His footwork is bad, and the athleticism being sapped certainly doesn't help. Like he dies on screens with regularity. He gets blown by pretty regularly. Like his closeouts, he either closes out too hard or too soft. He's not a good
Mm-hmm.
like closeout guy. There's nothing he
Yeah.
does well on defense really. Because like even interior where you would figure, oh, his strength will help him, he doesn't really utilize it.
Mm-hmm.
Like he gets bumped around, he gets moved by guys,
Oh yeah.
and it's not good in the slightest. Like I would be pretty surprised if he became a positive defender at the next level. Like his frame, you would think, oh, that's a good defensive prospect. No, like just no. He is
No.
probably the worst defensive prospect I have in the lottery for me, and
I think that
uh,
I'd have to think
that
about
might
it.
that
I would think about it first, but
like the
I might
fact
be
that he's in the
there.
conversation, the
I
fact that
might be
he's in the
there.
conversation with Jovic is saying something.
Well, I think he's a better
Like the fact that
defensive.
he,
I think there were more like legit like movement problems with Jovic personally on his about his
yeah,
defense, but I really think the fact that we've said as many negative things about him, and he's still like a top five guy, really just speaks to his shooting though. Like
yeah,
that's how
his
special his
shooting,
shooting is.
it's
I'm willing to bet
special.
on him. He's the. I think he's one of the. I think he might be the second youngest player in this draft behind Duran, which is like you
Mhm.
look at Duran and AJ's frame, and you say, and if you were to tell someone who didn't know anything, yeah, these are like the two youngest players in the draft. I think they would call you crazy. Um,
Yeah.
but I bet I'm banking a bit more on it. I understand your side of it though of what you've
Hmm.
seen the other problems. I think that he is risky in some. He's risky in like you talking about like high end outcomes about what he can
Hmm.
reach. But I do think that being a big wing that can shoot will always have a spot in this league. Um,
Hmm.
like there's certain guys like him and Sabario guys like oh if you can shoot at that size he'll be able to play.
Yeah.
Like at the very least, you can play. You will be
Yeah.
on a
Like
roster at the very least. Like you bring some
his
form of
shoot.
value.
Yeah, his shooting. Like he might be, if he got more opportunity, the greatest shooting freshman
Mm.
ever.
Oh, yeah, and the
And
thing is,
that's
like, this is like how good of a shooting season he had with the context of him basically picking up DMPs for like the first half of the season. Like that's
yeah.
like
Like
incredible.
yeah.
Um, I think he has an advantage that most players don't, which is having an NBA background, which means
Yeah.
he's gotten NBA trainers since he was a kid. He got the scrimmage with the Toronto Raptors when he was rehabbing, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah.
Um, so I think teams who might buy into that as well of like this guy
Hmm.
knows what it's like to go through it. His dad's a former player. He's an assistant coach. I understand your concerns about him, but I just think that there's just a lot of there's a lot of upside in taking him. As far as fits go, OKC's a spot for him that I wouldn't mind. Um, Detroit, if they fall out of the top three, top two or three, I think that's a good spot for him. Um, do you have any other ones that come to mind?
No, I think those would be the main two.
And I think like any if he falls out of the top five, like no matter what, like teams like seem to at the very least consider this taking him as a BPA guy.
Yeah. I
Um,
on
I don't
paper,
think.
Sacramento is interesting, but also it's Sacramento, and
Okay,
I
so
don't I
yeah,
I don't want to wish Sacramento on any prospect. So
Indiana is another team. I think Indiana fits on a lot of these prospects. Like
yeah, just because so much is fluid with their roster.
yeah,
Like they have
like they
Halliburton, and
aren't
that's like their
good, but like
only
I know
staple.
what they're doing. Like I can
Yeah,
see the vision of where they're going with this team.
yeah.
Um, yeah, but I think I would take him as high as number three, depending on the team. Realistically, I see him going anywhere between like 4 and like 8. Um,
Yeah.
if he falls past like 9 or 10, I'm calling it still the draft on the spot. I highly doubt he will. Especially the moment he started getting minutes, like it became clear like he's gonna be a top 10 lock.
Yeah.
Because
I
that's
would be
all it
really
happened. That was the
surprised.
only thing that was like holding him back. Because like there was a time I thought
Yeah.
people were thinking like 15 to 20s with him, but that's because he wasn't
Yeah.
playing. And that was like the idea of you just banking on the high school stuff, which is banking on his tape when he was 15 years old. And I know
Yeah.
people like myself and a few others would be crazy enough to bank on that, but that's why we
Hmm.
don't work in NBA front offices. So
Yeah.
I think
But
that he's easily their second best prospect
mhm.
as far as NBA prospects go,
Yeah.
and you know like I just think that those are not few for like top five walk. For me, I understand you maybe think like 5, 6, 7 is maybe, um, but I do think there's a decent amount of upside with him.
Hmm.
It's just like I agree with you though. Like, is he going to reach this upside? And
Yeah.
there's always like two sides of that. Like we said, people were saying the same thing about Jalen Brown. He has a lot of upside. Can he reach it? He did. Other prospects, I can't think of one really off the top of my head that had like really high upside but didn't reach it. Then they didn't. Like it really just depends on
Hmm.
situation. Depends on the wiring. I don't know AJ Griffin personally. I've never seen him play in person. Usually, if I
Hmm.
see a player play in person, I can gauge it a bit better. But I haven't seen him
Yeah.
play yet. Like I could tell with like Cade when I saw him. I'm like, oh, I can see where the wiring is with it. But
Yeah.
um, those are questions.
I
And
think.
that's the joy of like getting to see guys in person. Is
Hmm.
that like you do see more than what you can see when watching the tape.
Yeah. I think that with him, I probably am more comfortable with him in the 5 to 6 range. I think that outside, so the order I go in is Paolo Chet as like tier one, 1A, 1B. Then the next tier is Ivy Jabari. And then there's like half a tier for Griffin and Duran.
Would you
I
put
I think
Saden if Saden and that Griffin Durant too? If he
I
declares.
think I would have him another like half tier down.
I
I
would
think
probably so the way I would do it is I would have like the same like top two, but then again, cause I'm higher
mhm,
under on AJ, but like and we'll talk more about when we do the episodes about those two. But I would
mhm.
probably have Duran. I'd actually probably just have Duran and Saden in a two by themselves.
Mm. Yeah,
Um,
I think there are certain contexts in which Duran would make more sense. I also think
I
he's a
think it's
higher
very.
like
I think there
four.
are. I do agree. Like there are situations, and this isn't just true with like AJ. This is true with like
Mhm.
basically everyone I have in that second tier. Is like there are certain contexts. Like I don't think like at number three I would take Duran, but like there's certain contexts where that 4 or 5 pick, where it's like I kind of understand like if he fits it because it's not just about like what you see on tape. It's also about like
Mhm.
what goes on. And I can't speak on the other prospects, but from what I've heard, Duran is just so mature as a prospect and like the defensive communication stuff. He's like just he's so smart there. But we'll talk more about Duran when we get to that.
Yeah,
I think
I
high end
think
outcome for AJ Griffin, like the highest like outcome
mhm.
is like 20 plus point per game, like best one of the best shooters in the league, like all star kind of player. If he reaches that, that's the question though. Like
Mhm.
that's the question. Like it may feel like a high ceiling, 20 plus point per game, best one of the best 3 point shooters in the league, all star feels like a high ceiling, and it is. But at the same time, it's like I'm not saying he's gonna reach that ceiling. Like I'm more confident
Mhm.
that Paulo will reach his ceiling than I am about AJ.
I think AJ is the prospect that I have in my top 5 that I'm least confident in reaching a ceiling.
I would
I
agree with that.
Yeah, I think
I
his
think
ceiling
as
is
far
like
as ceilings, like if they reach his ceiling, it'd be Paulo. Then probably I have Ivy too. Ivy and
mhm.
Chet, I go back and forth on for like if I'm my confidence in reaching the ceiling, and then I think it's close between like Jabari and like AJ, like will they reach their ceiling? And
Yeah,
I think Jabari is a higher ceiling than AJ as an overall player,
same.
but um, I think they're close though. But still, I'm
Yeah.
slightly more confident because I think I can see him more. But there are questions with Jabari that we'll talk about in another episode
Yeah.
of this.
I think I think
Do you
high
want
end
to
outcome
kind
for
of wrap up your
AJ for
spots on
me.
this, and then we can talk about the other guys, the other two?
Sure, yeah. AJ Griffin high end outcome is like 22, 5, and 2
I would make a
on
3 or 4, but that's like if you really get in a situation like that. But the turnovers would be high as
yeah.
well.
Yeah, I don't buy into AJ's playmaking, so I'd say like those stats on about like 60-ish true shooting, like
Which is
high true
basically a
shooting.
norm in today's league for
Yeah.
stars. But I see that. I agree with that personally, but
Yeah.
I think it's
But
more. I think it's more like he becomes a really good number 3. I think that's like the more realistic like outcome for him right now.
yeah.
I would love to see him reach his like full outcome from like what I saw from him when it was like when he was in high school. Because
Mhm.
I will always believe that if injuries did not get in the way of his development, he would be the best player in this class. But that's just not how it's worked, unfortunately, with
Mhm.
him. And contexts change, and you know
Things happen.
things happen. But
Yeah.
I really think you should probably talk about Mark Williams and Wendell more. We got 2 more seconds before we wrap this up. Um,
Yeah.
but I think you've just done more homework on them than I have. I don't have many I wouldn't say I don't have many positive. I think Wendell Moore is a fine prospect, but there are other times he did frustrate me a little bit. But let's give your
Yeah.
thoughts on both of them. So
Yeah.
I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I'll start with Mark Williams because I'm just higher on him. Not that I'll get into one more, but with Mark Williams, I have him as like probably the best center besides Duran in this class, like true center. And he, as like cliche as it is and like stereotypical, he gives me like Clint Capella, Jarrett Allen sort of
Mm-hmm.
like archetype. That's just the easiest place to like slot him in at because you look at him, he has a very good physical physical tools. He is 7'1" with a 7'7" wingspan and is a very, very good athlete for his size. He runs the floor well. He, like all those things track across that archetype. He can't shoot that well, which also tracks. And I wouldn't project him to be any sort of shooter at the next level, but he is really good at finishing inside the paint, whether that be off a pick and roll and running in transition, because he actually leaks out really well for his size, whether that be him like having a drawn up lob play, whatever it be, he shoots very solidly in the paint and is not just like a physical presence there. He also has good patience. He knows when to pump fake, get his guy going, and
Mm-hmm.
then follow through. And since he's so big, you kind of have to jump. So
Yeah.
it's hard not to jump at a Mark Williams because if you don't, he can just finish over you. And with like lobs, he's good at catching lobs. He was a regular lob partner for Paolo. He is a good finisher from the dunker spot. He doesn't only need to be used in pick and roll because he is good at just finding the right places to be in the restricted area, like in the paint. He just knows where to go to get to his spots. And the real calling card with him is his defense, where he is a great help side rim protector and just in general a great rim protector. I think he's probably my favorite rim protector besides Chet in this class. He plays super well in drop coverage and has patience with his blocks. Like his defensive instincts and feel for the game on that end is really high. He doesn't jump too early. He is able to utilize every inch of that wingspan to make people pay if they go into the paint at him. He's not like switchable. He can be a little heavy footed, but he has a good motor. He like knows where to be on defense. He's able to cover up for some guys. He is someone who like I wouldn't be surprised if he was a good starter in the league for a while. And in a class with depth that is lacking, which when I say this class is a weaker class, I'm more so referring to the back end of things because I think after the top 6, there's a pretty heavy drop off compared to a draft classes that we've been accustomed to over the last couple of seasons. And I think I wouldn't be shocked if he went late lottery, because in a class where like mid first round is picking role players, he has a super high floor. Does he have a super high ceiling? I'm not entirely sure. Like, I think he could get like a Jarrett Allen sort of all-star appearance where like he got in as one of the last guys, and like Jarrett Allen is a great player, and I think that is if that is the outcome for Mark Williams, that is a fantastic outcome. That's probably like his highest outcome, and that would be really, really good. But I was looking at his and Jarrett's numbers, and they were like pretty similar. Mark Williams fouled significantly less. Like, Mark Williams does not foul, which is a huge thing on defense, because you look at a Walker Kessler with like him getting hyped up as a great rim protector, and Walker Kessler has juice in that area, but he also fouls a crap ton. And that is not the case with Mark Williams, because he's very disciplined on that end of things. He knows when and how to do things, and like it's very impressive to watch him work on that end.
Yeah, and it's I want quickly about Wendell, because I do want to wrap this up soon, because this went way longer than I thought. We aimed for 45 minutes. This is well over an hour.
Yeah,
which is great, because I think it gives us a good idea of what we can do in the future. But
yeah, Wendell Moore is just like a jack of all trades kind of guy. He has a really good wingspan for his size. He has a 6'10" wingspan. He uses that wingspan really well on defense. Can get into DHOs. He has really good hands on defense. Doesn't over gamble on things. He has good like perception for passing lanes, and will occasionally disrupt a DHO. And in those steals, he turns those steals into pretty easy transition points. He's really good at attacking the rim in transition. He has good ball handling in transition. He's a really good player in the open floor. In the half court setting, he shot really well from 3 this season. I think it's a little inflated from what he actually will be, but I don't think he's as bad as he was in his freshman and sophomore years. I think the improvements he made in areas of scoring are legit. Like, if you watch him, his mid-range shot, it looks good. It could stand to be a little more efficient, but it should be like a useful tool at the next level. Pick and roll, he operates decently enough. He's a decent passer, good enough to make the right read consistently, but it's not like he's creating his own passing windows or anything. Like, driving kicks isn't really something to expect from him. He could be like a tertiary playmaker, like someone who will make the right reads, can occasionally.
He's a connector. That's the best one.
Yeah, not someone to run your offense. He will be a guy within your offense that is really good at connecting things. He can finish plays. He's a good finisher. Shot really well at the rim this season. Shot really well from 3. And there's nothing like he's elite at, but he can fill in a bunch of roles. He's a jack of all trades kind of guy. And how much you buy into that kind of matters on your perspective of things and your philosophy on how you value that sort of prospect. But I think he will be a useful role player.
I agree with that. And another thing, he's a young junior. He's a really young junior.
Yeah, he's actually...
He's like true sophomore age, I think, which is wild.
He is a month older than Ty Washington.
Yeah. Which is something that's wild. And he's been on so many... It's wild to think that was his first tournament appearance.
Yeah.
Because his freshman year, it got canceled because of the pandemic. Sophomore year, that was an uncharacteristically bad year for Duke. And then this year, obviously, they made the Final Four. I liked him a lot as a prospect. I think that he's a very fitting player for Coach K's final run. But to end it, though, I do want to talk because even though Coach K's retiring, Duke is not going away anytime soon. Because John Sire can recruit. And what he's been able to get over the next The last this few cycles are gonna be like special. I do want to quickly end this by talking about some of these prospects for next few years. The big one being Dariq Whitehead. I think there's a big 2 for 2023 for that draft. But as of right now, and it's Victor Wembanyama and Scoot Henderson. That's the top 2. Mm-hmm. There's a race for that 3rd spot, and I think that Dariq Whitehead is very much in that race. For number 3 in this class, I think he's up there with the Thompsons. I think it's the Thompsons and him right now for number 3. Maybe throw Cam Whitmore in there. We'll see as time goes on. But Dariq is someone who is relatively young for his class. August 1st, 2004. Which most August players are like the next class or up. Mm-hmm. And he's somebody that played with Montverde since he was in 8th grade. And to see a player stick it that long at that school is rare. But he's a really good athlete, like great vertical. Like I think he's borderline freakish, but not quite. But he's a complete basketball player. He can pass well. He's had good mentors. He's played with Kay Cunningham. I believe he even played with RJ Barrett, which is wild to think about. But he's just very complete. He's not quite the athlete that the Thompson twins are, but he's close to them. Not like too close, but like relatively close. And I think he has better like basketball skills than both of them do. But it'll be interesting to see where they go with that. Kyle Filipowski, I hope I pronounced that right. Big, decent shooting potential, decent passing potential. I think he's the second best prospect for next year. Derek Lively, I'm not as high on Derek Lively as most people are. I think he's still a solid prospect, but there are a lot of questions I have with him, like defensively, as far as communication goes. I think he's going to be solid just because he's one of the biggest human beings on the planet that can move very well. He's basically, to me, like a slightly like upgraded version of like James Wiseman, where he's kind of a little bit better at everything Wiseman did. And to be very clear, I was not very high on Wiseman as well. But I think that they're kind of overselling what he can and can't do a bit. And then for next year's class, I haven't watched too much Jared McCain, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But Mackenzie Mgbako is probably my favorite player from that class. He's big, he's strong, and he has a lot of city potential. So there are guys that Duke has that they're going to be very good for years to come. But I think it's going to wrap up this one, though. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below. I'll try to get to them.